Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. She had been making the same dua for so long that she knew exactly how she would say it. There was no drama in it anymore, no tears every night, no desperate pleading, just the same quiet request again and again and again. She had done everything she thought a person was supposed to do. She had prayed, she had asked Allah during the quiet hours of the night. She had tried to be patient, she had even told herself, if it is good for me, Allah will bring it to me. And yet, the door remained closed. At first, she thought it was a delay. Then she thought perhaps she wasn't being patient enough. Then she wondered if there was something wrong with her dua. And eventually, she began doing something most of us do when we don't understand an answer from Allah. She started negotiating with it. Maybe this is just temporary. Maybe I should try again. Maybe one more conversation will change things. Maybe this is the month. She kept a small part of her life permanently reserved for the possibility that the door might open. And that little reservation was exhausting because she couldn't completely move forward, but she couldn't completely let go either. Then one evening she was sitting alone after making the same dua, and for the first time she didn't ask Allah to open the door. She said, Ya Allah, if you're not going to open this for me, please help me stop standing here. It was a different kind of prayer. There was no bargaining in it, no condition, no attempt to tell Allah what the ending should be, just surrender. And nothing miraculous happened that night. The next morning, the door was still closed. But something inside her had shifted. She went about her day. She stopped checking. She stopped searching for signs. She stopped turning every coincidence into a message. And slowly, she began to understand something she hadn't understood when she first started making dua. She had been asking Allah for a particular outcome, but Allah had never promised her that outcome. He had promised something much greater, that He hears her. The Quran says in Surah Baqarah, ayah number 186, "And when my servants ask you concerning me, indeed I am near. I respond to the call of the supplicant when he calls upon me." Notice what Allah tells us first: I am near. Before the answer, before the outcome, before the thing you're asking for, near. And perhaps that was the part she had forgotten. She had started measuring whether Allah was listening by whether the door opened. But Allah's nearness was never dependent on the door. And this is where unanswered dua becomes difficult. Because we are comfortable with the idea that Allah may say yes. We understand wait. But what about when the answer is simply not this? Not because you didn't ask sincerely, not because you were not worthy, but because Allah knows something you don't. The Quran says in Surah Baqarah, ayah number 216, perhaps you love a thing and it is bad for you, and perhaps you dislike a thing and it is good for you. Allah knows and you do not know. We often quote that verse when something doesn't work out. But sit with the last part for a moment. Allah knows, you do not know. That's the part that asks something from us. Because sometimes we don't actually want Allah's wisdom. We want Allah to confirm ours. I know this person is right for me. I know this opportunity is what I need. I know this is where my happiness is. And then we ask Allah to make our understanding come true. But Tawakkul asks us to leave room for the possibility that our understanding is incomplete. And that doesn't mean you stop making dua. It doesn't mean you become passive. You take the means, you ask, you try, you seek guidance, you make istikhara. You do what is within your ability. But there comes a point where you have to stop confusing persistence with attachment. Because sometimes we say, I'm trusting Allah, when what we really mean is, I'm waiting for Allah to give me the answer I have already decided is right. There is a difference, and perhaps this is why some doors stay closed. Not because Allah wants you to stay your entire life staring at them, But because your life is bigger than that door, you don't always get an explanation. You don't always get the person to tell you why. You don't always get to see what Allah was protecting you from. And perhaps that's part of the test. Can you trust Allah without having access to the full story? She eventually stopped asking, "Why didn't Allah give me this?" and began asking, "Who am I becoming because Allah didn't?" That question changed everything because she noticed things she hadn't noticed before. She had more time for people she had neglected. She became less anxious about the future. Her worship stopped revolving around one particular wish. And strangely, she began to feel closer to Allah without needing a particular outcome to prove that He was listening. She still remembered the door. Of course she did. But she no longer stood outside it. And perhaps that is what surrender sometimes looks like. Not forgetting what you wanted, not pretending it never mattered, not forcing yourself to call disappointment a blessing, just reaching a point where you can say, "Ya Allah, I wanted this. You knew how much I wanted it, and you still chose differently. So I will trust the one who sees the whole road, even when I can only see the closed door." And maybe the most beautiful thing about dua isn't that every door eventually opens. Maybe it is that even when one doesn't, Allah can still lead you somewhere you would never have found while standing there.